Hi everyone. If you've made it to this video, you're getting pretty close to your first, at least with me, because maybe you have attempted it before, experiment with fasting and or Breatharianism. Remember, it's a very personal, individual, customized process that you're really exploring on your own, but utilizing me as your guide for now, because that's definitely important and necessary, especially for something like this. And we're doing it together as a collective for support, because that also is very helpful along the way. Even if you've made it to this video and the next couple that come after this one, in which I'll be instructing you specifically with some different options to get started in your first trial experiment. It doesn't mean that you have to start right away. Especially if you've blown through these first videos in, say, a week, give or take. That may be a little too soon. Or you may be ready right now. So discernment of when to begin, not only when in the course of this course, but also when in regards to day of the week, season, period of the month, etc., is very, very necessary. So just because you've made it to this video and the next couple in which I say, okay, here are your options, here's how to do it, doesn't mean you have to right then, because that will be an ongoing relationship that takes into consideration all of the principles we've discussed so far, including discipline, including pratipaksha bhavana, including your specific type in the Enneagram, Ayurveda, and whatever other system during this intermediary time before and if you've cultivated a one-to-one intuitive present moment connection with your compass, your guidance, and the source. But waiting for the opportune time is a key part of the journey. Pratipaksha bhavana itself could be incorporated in waiting for the right time. If you tend to be a procrastinator, there's never going to be a right time. And you'll use that as an excuse to prolong it. So it might be good to start now. On the other hand, if you tend to jump the gun out of overzealousness or excitement, then maybe waiting a bit is a good idea. Also, I'd like for you to have at least a couple of weeks, if not more, if not a full month, under your belt of journaling, writing down the bad habits or old paradigm or poor conditioning that you have, as I laid out in the other homework assignment, in each of the 5 koshas: physical, energetic, emotional, mental, spiritual, in regards to food and or body image in general, and then cultivating a pratipaksha bhavana practice, cultivating the opposite practice for each one of those. And when you have reversed the direction or gotten the freight train stopped and then beginning to move in the opposite direction, I want you to journal, write down what comes up in the absence or in the new pattern, in the absence of the old pattern or the presence of the new pattern. And again, you can get as specific and detailed as you want with each of the 5 koshas. What comes up when you don't eat that same midnight snack that you know is unhealthy? What comes up when you attempt to look at yourself in the mirror more lovingly? What comes up when you choose not to look at yourself in the mirror, when normally you do with a sense of vanity or self-deprecation or self-loathing or judgment? What comes up? As you're rewiring the program. In addition, as you're beginning to learn more about your dosha and how to eat possibly Ayurvedically, and I would strongly suggest that you go to joyfulbelly.com and sign up for a free account in which you can take a quiz, basically, with characteristics of body, mind, lifestyle, etc. And it will very thoroughly present a list of ingredients, foods, type of food, and even delicious recipes. And it will let you know this recipe or this food balances or is supportive for your dosha. This food or recipe aggravates your dosha. And I'd like for you to get that going in the right direction. At the very least, get your poor conditioning, bad habits to stop, to understand discipline, pratipaksha bhavana, to know thyself in both your pathological forms as well as the potential for balance and harmony and transformation and growth and healing. As well as making better choices to tip the scale the other way for at least a few weeks, honestly. If not more, before you take the first step of experimenting with a full-on fast or full-on breatharianism. Along the way of that, it may spontaneously occur. And you didn't even choose or put on the calendar when to begin. That's how it happened for me, but I've not told my full-on story yet. I will at some point. But it was pretty much 7 years, which ironically is a full cycle of life. A full quote-unquote replenishment of my cellular makeup from the time that I first was interested in it to when it spontaneously happened. So you may have been interested in it for a while, and years later, this course with me has been presented to you, and just a few weeks of engaging it the way I'm presenting it is enough to then get started. All I'm saying is, on the one hand, don't procrastinate. On the other hand, don't jump the gun. Be precise. Listen. So, today, I'd like to go into a little more depth and specificity as part of our groundwork and framework for all that we're going to be talking about and experiencing in this course. In particular, regarding the koshas, which I have already mentioned briefly in another video as well as today, which was connected with another homework assignment that I'm going to add to today. Let these homework assignments be also incorporated into your discipline and pratipaksha bhavana practices, awarenesses. I'd like for you to take them seriously. At the very least, thoroughly think them through. Thoroughly consider, contemplate, be aware of what I'm asking you to tune into. And when I say write it down, journal it, I do strongly recommend that. My writing, my journaling has been one of the most helpful and profound transformational tools along the way for me. If you tend toward rigid, neurotic adherence to rules and assignments out of some kind of fear or performance, then maybe you don't have to write down as much. Don't be so anal about it, so to speak. On the other hand, if you tend to kind of not follow through with specifics or follow instructions, thinking, oh yeah, I got that in the bag. But then when it comes time to talk about it or to share with me one-on-one or with the group, or for you to keep track and be able to look back along the way at your progress, and that component is lacking, then you'll wish you had written some stuff down. So I'm not just making suggestions. These are not just optional homework assignments, but the way you do it will again be highly customized for you. And I'd like for you to take into consideration discipline, knowing yourself, and pratipaksha bhavana. Because the homework is important in and of itself, content-wise, what it's asking you to do, what it's engaging, what it's turning on and activating and lighting up, what it's assisting to shift, but also simply the act, the intention of doing it and or setting time aside to think about these things is an important compartment of consciousness, if you will, that will be integrated, included, and utilized in this process. Because fasting, even if it's something you love to do, even if it's something you're excited about, even if it's coming very naturally to you, does still require commitment, discipline, vigilance, self-awareness. So just to strengthen that muscle of commitment, discipline, vigilance, self-awareness goes a long way. Whatever the content is, whatever the homework is. But the content also matters as well. So the pieces of homework I've given already are: write down some poor conditioning, some bad habits, some unhealthy aspects that you do in your life, physically, energetically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, around food and or body image or anything in that arena. Devise a pratipaksha bhavana plan to get going in the opposite direction. Practice that. And then write or notice what comes up as you implement that. Also, I gave the homework to watch my Enneagram videos, 2 parts. Get to know your Enneagram type. Supplementally, watch the 4-part Richard Rohr Enneagram talk that I put in the supplemental material folder. But that's not required. Definitely watch mine. Get to know your type. Get to know how your specific type is affected by or affects this process. Dive in a little bit to your Ayurvedic type or dosha. My recommendation is joyfulbelly.com and sign up for a free account, filling out the survey. I do recommend filling out the survey on joyfulbelly.com because it then spits back out a very sophisticated and specific formula for you to follow, which is going to be one option for what to eat when you eat, and begins to also speak to your lifestyle, your energetic makeup. Because your dosha has tendrils or roots in each of the koshas. So dosha is Ayurvedic type, kosha is layer, physical, energetic, emotional, mental, spiritual. How your dosha interacts with your koshas, and vice versa. For the Enneagram, as I say in my videos, I actually don't recommend that you go online and take a test. I prefer the Enneagram to be much more organic. It could actually indicate what type you are if you want to run and do a test and be told. It can be helpful, but it's also much more rewarding and much more along the lines of knowing yourself and not just being told who you are. And there's plenty of information to be able to, as I say in those videos, try on the different masks for yourself and see which one feels like you. Another way to discover which type you are in these 2 systems is to consider your symptoms or tendencies when you're not in a state of balance and harmony. Because sometimes when you're in a state of balance and harmony, you're very well-rounded, and it's more difficult to tell what type you are. Especially if you have pratipaksha bhavana'd sufficiently, which is in the other direction altogether from your pathology. But you can bring your questions. If you can't quite clarify or pinpoint where you are, what you are. Again, remembering to hold it loosely and to not over-identify with it, but to use it as a reference point to get going in the other direction. Not to justify or perpetuate bad habits and poor conditioning. So that was another homework. The next homework was to start making better food, eating, and lifestyle choices. And that could be informed by the Enneagram and Ayurveda. It could also be simply intuitive, because you already know this or that is not good, helpful, or healthy for you. So you choose less processed food, or don't have the midnight snack, or don't eat out at restaurants as much, or go to bed earlier, or wake up earlier, or take a break during the day when normally you would be go, go, go. Or don't take so many breaks during the day because that increases your procrastination. Whatever it is, start to make better food and lifestyle choices informed by all of the above, to start rebalancing, healing, and harmonizing your system specific to you and to help you get to know yourself. So, a little deeper dive about the koshas and one more homework assignment is the purpose of this video. After that amazingly long-winded introduction I just gave. But it all matters. Again, kosha in Sanskrit means layer or sheath, covering. So, as I said with the chakras, the word chakra means wheel. So whoever first saw them psychically intuited that they were circular and they were spinning. So they called them wheels. Similarly, whoever first saw the layers of the energy field or the aura psychically saw that they seemed like sheaths or coverings. So they called them Kosha, sheath, layer, covering. Also, like the chakra system, some go with 7 chakra model or more. Same with the aura or layers of the field. Some go with 5, some go with 7, some go with more. Some may even go with less, because generically speaking, they're basically referring to mind, body, spirit, which would be 3, or body, mind, spirit in order of density. Mind, body, spirit is just kind of how we've learned to say it. Body, mind, spirit pretty much covers it all. But those can be broken down into more subtle or nuanced layers. But I like to work with 5. And I like to specifically work with the 5 Kosha model, with a couple of interpretations that are subtly changed from the original based on my own contribution, insight, experience, and understanding. So this, just like the belief system thing, is very malleable, but not just random, willy-nilly, do whatever you want with it. It should be grounded in experience and research and reason. Before I go on, I'd like to introduce you to another Ken Wilber concept or distinction. It's very important as we go. And that is that every phenomenon, every thing has an interior and an exterior component. It's important to use these words accurately within this system. Of course, in just kind of regular everyday speech, they can be interchangeable, and in context, people know what you're talking about. But, as I also said, words make worlds, worlds make words, which means it actually matters what word you use and what the agreed upon meaning and interpretation is, so we can be specific about what we're talking about. But at the same time, meaning is not universal. So it can mean different things at different times, different cultures, different eras, different conversations. Which is another really amazing and mysterious and miraculous truth or fact of life and consciousness itself. How subjective it is, even in its objectivity. So, internal is actually, to Ken Wilber, and for what we're doing here, it's not the same as interior. Internal means inside of something. Internal to this body is organs, bones, muscles, blood, brain, and depending on how deeply internal you want to go. Internal to this house is furniture, books, fireplace, etc. External to this body is skin, hair, beard. External to this house is trees, mountains, clouds, rain, snow, etc. So that's internal versus external. Interior versus exterior is slightly different. You can have an interior and exterior component of internal and external phenomena. So interior points to and refers to the subjects or the experiencers' experience, interpretation, feeling of that thing, whether internal or external. The experience, the experiencer's experience, the feeler's feeling. Is interior, the meaning, the interpretation. Exterior is the objective component, again, of an internal or an external phenomenon, and could even refer to an interior phenomenon. It's the measurable part. It's the scientific, if you will, to use that word broadly, approach. The objective, quantifiable thing, how it's measured. So there's a correlation even between a subjective feeling and the objective, we'll say, brainwave pattern or neurochemistry that comes up as the exterior component of that interior feeling and direct experience. And we could go on and on and on endlessly into explaining this, splitting hairs, coming up with examples. But I simply want to introduce it to you so you can start thinking in that direction. And so that we can draw on these concepts in our conversations. So, the koshas, or layers of the energy field, are, roughly speaking, and this is how I slightly reinterpret it, subjectively, based on my experience and the model that I use. Also because I don't and never will claim to entirely know what the ancients were experiencing or meant when they said a particular thing. I can say how I experience or interpret or understand what they were saying for myself. Again, not just random, anything goes, but through deep looking, contemplation, research, and reason, I can put it in a slightly different package. I can upgrade it for you to understand it based on the times we live in now. So we're going to call the koshas, and I'll just use the English words because Sanskrit can get a little tongue twisty. If you want to know them, we can talk more specifically. Physical, energetic, emotional, mental, spiritual. At the very center or core of those is what I call the ultimate reality. The others are relative layers. We're not going to go for the ultimate reality right now. That is a key focal point in the meditation and spiritual inquiry, spiritual practice department that I teach and have to offer. But for now, for our conversation, we're going to say physical, energetic, emotional, mental, spiritual for the 5 kosha layers. Now, whether you break it down in 3 or 5 or 7 or more, exteriorly, these layers are in fact measurable by scientific instruments, observable by those with extrasensory abilities, and feelable. There is in fact a technique where you can, with your hands, feel the layers of another person's field. So that's the exterior component. Measurable by instruments, seeable with psychic vision, feelable with properly trained touch, hands. Anatomically, each chakra, which again is a spinning vortex or funnel, the narrow stem end of which plugs into the central energy channel from crown to perineum, sky to ground, which in Sanskrit is the Sushumna channel. Central channel. The chakra plugs in and then spirals out into an ever-widening vortex or funnel into the layers of your field all around you. And there's a really fun diagnostic matrix using the pendulum and other tools that can determine imbalances based on where the chakra interacts with which layer of the field. And it is aka the aura, aka human energy field, aka the koshas. All of those are interchangeable as far as I'm concerned, but depending on the system or the teacher or the learner, there might be specific nuances in there, and that's fine. In any case, each of the 5 layers of the field, fed by the 7 or however many chakras, have an interior, felt, interpretive, subjective, personal component as well. So, I'm going to run through each of the 5 as they relate to our conversation here, and then give you an assignment, a challenge that should stay with you even as you embark on periodic fasting and or breatharianism, and how they relate, because they relate with everything you do and experience. And you can again start thinking about things in this way: interior, exterior, chakras, layers of the field, koshas, doshas, all of these fun new words that some of you are learning for the first time. But it's not just with food, not just with fasting, not just with body image, but it's always with you, whatever you're experiencing. And you can be more and more and more in tune with it on a moment-by-moment basis, which comes as a natural result of looking into it, self-awareness, disciplining yourself to really touch base. It's another way of knowing yourself. So I'd like for you to keep track, write down, journal. You could draw, you could make a chart. It could be more stream of consciousness. However you like. Your interior, interpretive experience, as well as much as you can, because this won't be possible for all of them necessarily, your exterior, expressive, observable actions or experience for each of the 5 koshas, particularly in regards to food, fasting, eating, not eating, body image, etc. So physically, what does it feel like in your body? That's the interior component. Remember, it doesn't just mean internally. It's internal and external. Interior experience of internal and external physical body. See how specific? See how the Tibetans and the yogis and all of these ancient systems didn't have time for anything else but sitting in a cave and mapping consciousness. It's why they historically went away from the world. Too many distractions. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to write down. There's a lot to be aware of here. I don't have time to tend the garden or to milk the cow. And of course, many monks and yogis and sages did have chores like that and were incorporated into their mapping. Because this is not neglecting the exterior world at all. It's just to say the kind of practical, mundane world with chores and obligations, the 9-to-5 world, we'll call it, though it can be and should be incorporated, definitely depletes energy if you're coming from that old mindset, and definitely takes up a lot of time if you're coming from that old mindset. And some of us were called to spend most of our time and energy, so to speak, in mapping this stuff out. So it's easier for others who come along after. A groove is being laid down. So, physically, what does it feel like? What's your experience of being in your body? And again, you can take it as specifically as you want. In general, after you eat a specific food, in the morning, in the evening, after you do yoga, whatever, whenever, throughout the day. What does your belly feel like? What does your skin feel like? What does your shape, your density feel like? Your size feel like? To interact with the world. And then you can take it exteriorly as well. Look like. What does it look like? How much do you weigh? And this is not a weight loss program, because again, vatas may need to gain some weight. Kaphas probably need to lose some weight. But still, you could keep track objectively of your weight, your height, the color of your skin, the texture of your hair and nails, because all of this will most likely change. One profound change that I had was my teeth and gums, actually. Genetically, I have historically had receding gums and very sensitive teeth and gums, where it's been challenging to put anything super hot or super cold in certain areas of my mouth. Chewing ice or swishing cold water around, or ice cream, or on the other hand, something really hot creates kind of a nervous, like nerves, sensation that's really sharp and painful. However, since I began the Breatharian lifestyle, that's hardly sensitive at all anymore. I can eat ice cream. I can drink cold water. And my receding gums are a lot less severe than they were. So that's just an example. Details of things that you think are just given. That's just the way it is. Remember, back to our belief. That's just the way it has been. Doesn't mean that's the way it has to be or is gonna be. Some very profound miracles can and most likely will happen for you around things in your body and in all the other koshas that you thought was just the way it is. And it's really cool, really fun, really amazing to keep track so that you can remember. Because a lot of things you take for granted, and you don't even realize it changed until something happens to remind you. So physically, interior and exterior, internal and external. Energetically. Now, this one is definitely important in this conversation. Chakras and energetic kosha layers are, in and of themselves, in the energetic kosha layer. That's like where they live. So, tuning in, feeling the chakras, those portals that open through yoga practice and the other practices, tools, and techniques for nourishment that I'm going to be giving you. Can you actually feel them now? Or the layers of your field? Can you feel how they're affected by eating or not eating, or eating specific foods, or a particular pattern of fasting? Length of time or degree of intensity. What happens to your energy levels when you eat or don't eat? Or when you eat a particular thing? Be very specific, because again, we take these things for granted. Oh, after I eat, I'm just so full and I just need to want to take a nap, or whatever it is. That doesn't necessarily have to be the case. Maybe that's how it's always been, but that's not how it has to be. So also, energy levels. Often we entangle low energy with hunger. They are not necessarily codependent and shouldn't be, but we think they are. If I have low energy, it must mean I need to eat. But remember, eventually, you will either only eat when you're actually hungry, which requires a whole new set of awarenesses. When am I actually hungry? It's not just when my stomach's growling. When am I actually hungry? It's not just when it's 6 o'clock. When am I actually hungry? It's not just when my energy drops. So to differentiate between peaks and valleys of energy, because again, if food's primary function is energy, not the enjoyment part of food, but energy, then remember, if your energy drops, I'm giving you 7 other options besides food, or I could say 7 new kinds of food, because Jesus said Man does not live on bread alone. So there's a different kind of nourishment or food besides physical, third-dimensional food that you ingest and digest. So you could choose any of those 7 or a combination thereof. When you feel a dip in energy, and it's not necessarily hunger. And then you do that practice. Don't eat when you normally would, and you notice, I just got an uplift of energy, same as I would have had I eaten, but the other side effects that I don't necessarily like after I eat are not there. So I got actually a higher burst of energy without feeling heavy or imposed upon with a new burden in my belly. Or I don't have the skin breakout. Or I didn't have to spend money. Whatever it is. So keep track energetically. Your interior experience throughout the day, different times of day, in connection with eating and not eating, and what you're eating, what that food does energetically, where you are energetically in the morning, midday, evening, in relation to coffee or sleeping pills, or whatever else you use. Energy levels, and the exterior expression of that. What you're able to do, what you want to do. Also, if you're able to tune into the exterior measurement or observation of the energy field. So the exterior could be both the measurable component, the observable component, or it could be the expression, which is also quote-unquote measurable, quantifiable, observable. What's your expression? What do you do at various peaks and valleys of energy? Okay, next, emotional. This is a big one around food. Sometimes certain eating habits themselves started in response to a deeply emotional experience. We'll call it traumatic or dramatic. For example, kind of a common one, maybe in response or in reaction to having your heart broken, or even having a loved one or a pet, someone or something you were deeply emotionally tied to or entangled with, die or go away somewhere or leave you, quote unquote, or something from childhood, and a sense of void or emptiness or loneliness came. But instead of sitting with that and properly healing it, learning what there was to learn from it, by no fault of your own, you very quickly reached for something to attempt to fill that void, or to make you not lonely or feel empty. And very often, these lower level functions are the easiest to reach for. and bring the most kind of instant gratification, pleasure, or distraction or cover-up, like food or sex or sleep. But meanwhile, you become addicted to those things. And so, every time you feel that inkling of an emotion where it started, you've now created a mindless, reactive, habitual pattern that you totally even forgot why you do it. Again, just thinking that's the way it is. That's how it's always been. That's how it always will be. Forgetting that it started in the first place around a particular traumatic event. And maybe that's why the weight loss is not working, or whatever other fad diets or nutrition supplements or advice is just not doing the trick. Because there's a deeper seated samskara in there that you haven't dealt with. And that in and of itself can get dealt with through breatharianism and fasting, the way I'm going to put it out there. However, it's very much a part of the, again, meditation and spiritual work that I teach in the other department. So, emotionally, the emotion kosha, what do you feel emotionally in relation to food? When you eat a particular food, when you choose not to eat a particular food. Sometimes food brings on sadness. I've experienced this. Sometimes, in the assumption that low energy means hunger and you need it now, then emotionally can trigger this concept that some people call hangry. Hungry and angry at the same time. And I've seen people in that state and just get out of their way until they find that food. They are a slave. Very truly. A slave to their emotions and to the assumption around food, to the physiological need, to the energetic need, all of it. So, of course, I'm going to guide you through those things, but it's important that to begin with, you get to know them. Not just take anything for granted, not assume anything, or to not assume a universal when it's actually specific to you. What emotions come up for you around food, either when you're eating or not eating, or when you're looking at food, when you see a cupcake, or you see someone else eating, and feelings of desire, but can't have it, or body image issues, or jealousy, or whatever it is around food. Feelings, emotions. So remember, the interior is feeling, but feeling doesn't have to mean emotion. We're getting really subtle here. Feeling can be sensation. Feeling, we use these words kind of interchangeably in our everyday speech. But feeling doesn't equal emotion. And emotion is a kind of feeling. There's many other kinds of feelings as well. So wake up your feeling around emotions. Anger, sadness, loneliness, jealousy, hangriness, loneliness, did I say that one already? In relation to this whole conversation. And then exteriorly, the expression of that. What do? You feel lonely, you reach for whatever food it is to help mask the loneliness, and then when you eat it, it doesn't help at all. It didn't make anything better. So then you feel even more of that original emotion, or you have a positive and negative reaction simultaneously. Endorphins, that tasted so good, but now I feel like shit. And so now I'm into self-loathing mode, and that's when bulimia and other kinds of binge, purge patterns emerge. Binge, purge patterns emerge. Binging and purging is another important thing to talk about, because binging and purging is not the same as feasting and fasting. That's a very important distinction. Feasting and fasting is something else altogether. Binging and purging is the pathological manifestation of eating and not eating for the wrong reasons. Feasting and fasting is something else and is conscious, intentional, intelligent, intuitive, healthy, balanced, and is what we're doing here, along with Breatharianism. So what are your expressions of emotion? That's the exterior. And then interior of emotion, what does it feel like? What's the feeling feel like? Mentally, the next one, is what stories you tell yourself. This is not yet belief. That's going to come next. What stories you tell yourself, and whether they were conjured up by yourself or from an experience, or told to you and bought by you from the collective or from others. What stories, what thoughts, what mental component, ruminations, do you have around food, body image? There's like the should, ought to, need to stories in there. I need to lose weight. Well, maybe you do, but why is that story in there? I shouldn't eat that. Well, maybe you shouldn't, but why is that should in there? I ought to do this differently. Well, maybe you ought to, but again, why is the ought to in there? Does the need to be there? Does the ought to be there? Should the should be there? What I'm returning you to, hopefully, is a more organic, freely chosen, even if it's the same outcome, just without all the stories, without all the commentary. What stories, what thoughts come when you look at yourself in the mirror? And sometimes it's so fast, you don't even register it as thoughts. It's just, that's what I think about myself. That's what it is. Slow it down. What do you think about food? What do you think about? What opinions do you have? What stories and commentary about food, about body image, or about any of the other koshas? So again, just as the energetic layer is where layers of the field and chakras live specifically, but there's components in all the others as well. Same as mentally. The mental layer is where thoughts exist in the energy field component, but there's an interior experience of thoughts. The feeling of thoughts about any of the other layers or anything else at all. So then what's the expression? Another exterior way to measure thoughts is like brainwave patterns. But of course, a EEG machine can't read what your actual thought, the actual content of your thought is, but it can determine what state you're in, what parts of your brain are lighting up. That's a cool exterior measurable component of the mental field, the mental layer. But for our purposes, we can just say, what's the exterior expression? What's the body do? What do you say? How do you interact with others in relation to your thoughts? And what are your thoughts about food, about your body, about feasting, about fasting, about diet, about exercise, about nutrition? Finally, spiritual component, spiritual kosha or layer is, to me, and this is slightly where I reinterpret or repackage it from the original Vedas for my experience and delivery and teaching. Spiritual component is like your self. It's where your self lives, if we could say it like that. But your relative version of self, not the ultimate self. Relative self, that has followed through and accumulated beliefs and experiences that create beliefs through many lifetimes. And you don't have to believe in many lifetimes to do this. It could simply be in this lifetime, the accumulation of experiences that then embedded beliefs that then make you who you are. Because remember, what you believe about the world is how you experience the world, and how you experience the world reestablishes beliefs about the world. So, I'd like for you to really take a look. I've already pointed to this in the belief video, but in relation to the koshas and this homework assignment, what do you believe about life, about food, about energy, about fasting? This might even get into what's the purpose. What do you believe you're doing this for? Why do you believe it's important? What do you believe is the purpose of life? What do you believe about yourself? Yourself. Who is yourself? Who are you? And what does that feel like? And what do those beliefs determine about how you are, or how you manifest, or how you self-express? The beliefs, notice, are deeper and different than merely thoughts. Thoughts come from beliefs. But what are the beliefs, the fundamental beliefs about life, about yourself, about food, about the purpose of this, about any of the other layers? Belief about your body, or belief about the physical body in general. and ask, is this belief malleable? Is this belief universal? Is it reflective of a truth? Does this belief have to be there? Is it serving me? And then the expression of the belief. In the world of energy work, this layer actually contains remnants or leftovers in the actual fibers of the field that come from other lives or previous experiences. You don't have to know energy work, you don't have to do energy work for them to be there or for them to be eliminated. Because again, the ripples go through all the layers, and when the belief changes, not through affirmations, but through experience and through softening and massaging the soil of your unquestioned beliefs, the way things are, then reflected in that layer of the field, either measured by an instrument. They have this thing called Wilberian photography where it shows spikes in your field, or someone with that psychic gift turned on can see the snags, the tears, the congestion, the blockages, the obstacles in that layer of the field that were carried over from another life and are then informing all the others. But you don't have to see that, you don't have to know that in order for that to change. I'm just saying most likely you would see a change if you were observing it and measuring it in that kind of exterior way. However, for our purposes here, for your homework, the exterior expression of that belief. What does that belief, quote unquote, make you do? How does it make you act? Unquestioningly, habitually, blindly, mindlessly. Again, around any of the other layers, or food, or not food, or body image, or nourishment. The belief about energy, the belief about nourishment, the belief about sustenance of life, the belief about processing energy through your system, the belief about what food does for you, the belief about a particular allergen that you have. Now, I am not suggesting you go and test out your allergens. Again, I've told you I have at least one that when I last experienced it was anaphylactic and could possibly kill me. However, I have experienced trace amounts of that allergen, and I did not react the same as I have before. So I have reason to believe that that has changed. The milder allergens have been reset. That's a whole other conversation we can talk about because I'd like to share some other specifics from my experience. However, it's still true that if I believe I'm allergic to something, then the manifestation of it will be a certain way. If I then have an experience where I eat something that I used to think I was allergic to and I don't react the same way, then my belief changes. Same as body shape, size, density, type, etc. And how you live, how you are because you believe that certain thing. And I just want you to observe these things. Observe without changing or fixing. Let that happen on its own. Observe your physical feelings and expression, your energetic feelings and expression, your mental feelings or experience and expression, and your spiritual or belief-based feelings and expression. Just be honest about it. And again, let it change on its own. This is part of getting to know yourself, disciplining yourself, setting your trajectory, accepting yourself, loving yourself. And then the rest, the miracles, the healing, happens on its own. So that's your homework. That's your download of the day. I'm so thrilled to be on this ride with you. Thank you again for trusting me. Let us continue. Alone and together. Together and alone. Hopefully this is rewarding in and of itself as new awarenesses and insights and compartments are waking up and the changes are happening very naturally, very spontaneously. So in upcoming videos, I plan to at some point tell my story with this more fully, introduce a couple more practices, and then give you the green light, the go-ahead to have your first experiment in this. As always, be in touch with any questions or experiences or troubleshooting that you may have. Thank you for letting me be your guide, because again, that's important until you don't need me anymore. But I'm humbled and I'm honored to share this with you. Namaste.